This is our final proverb from the Sudan.
Let's hear it.
Even the sharpest ear cannot hear an ant singing.
Even the sharpest
Yes.
Ear.
cannot
Hear.
the ant singing.
Yes.
Okay. The assumption here is that it's human ear.
The assumption is that ants sing.
The assumption,
The sharpest ant here can hear the ear sing.
What?
Sounds like back to grammar. You saw that goat riding.
No, it's Eric. It's just,
is Eric. Eric doesn't see his goats riding a bicycle.
If the ant here can hear an ant sing, then the sharpest ear of an ant
Okay.
can hear an ant
Let's
sing.
get to basics. These are proverbs written by human beings.
Uh,
And in these proverbs, they portray their understanding of these creatures who share this planet with us. Okay? So, it's a human perspective of the ant.
okay.
Yeah, not aunt, ant. And any sound that these creatures who share,
And we're
This
talking
will-
about ant.
we're talking about
aren't we talking about ant and not ant? Aren't we?
I am beginning to believe it with all sincerity that it's an error to allow natives such as yourself to learn more than one language.
Ouch. Ay, ay, ay. That is stick a knife and twist it.
Wait.
Simple proverb.
Sawa basi.
Sudanese are talking about ant. Shafu. Okay? Then here you are.
Hearing your own things.
Hearing. Are you here or was it here?
Ohoro Joho is the CEO of Sandbox Capital and former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office of the National Treasury. He's back in the studio. Good morning.
Morning.
What do you hear City saying?
As an SCT, I think is on another planet.
Yeah.
I think it's what's interesting about this is I'm going to suggest one of these days you should get this spokesman from this
Communities,
groups.
yes.
Communities to come and tell us what we mean by this thing.
And here you are saying that I'm the one who lives on another planet.
Okay. Touche.
Okay.
But I think my take of it, because you guys have been prosecuting this for the last hour, it means that what I heard is however sharp you think you are, it's not enough. Right, yeah. However sharp you think, whatever it is, whatever skill, whatever area you're in, keep a bit humble.
I assume, Mr. Doe, that the intergalactic journey is over. We're back on Earth.
Well, let's just say first impressions are usually the right ones. All comes razor, as they call it.
As they call it.
Yes.
Things are happening, Ohoro.
Yeah.
The election took place. The final declaration of the presidential result was made.
Yeah.
Supreme Court is coming to an end on Monday, and then we continue. Now, has there been an impact at all on the economy, people's psyche, business so far in terms of just perception or no?
Two levels. Yes and no. On the grassroots, life must go on. So what's been very interesting is we've almost come to accept this. Wanjiku on the street just accepts, this is it. In fact, maybe this is the new way of doing Kenyan politics. That basically you compete and then you end up in court and someone else, you take it to another referee. It looks like we are embedding this as a permanent way of being. But clearly on a more the formal sector, from everything I've seen, people, of course, planned on it. And they're hoping this will be easier this time round. And so any decisions around spending, I think are definitely on hold. I have a situation, for example, where I've seen a jump in people applying for jobs. Now, it's bad enough, but clearly, for those of us who may be looking to employ, you've sensed more people looking for work. But I think it's also because there's sort of a risk a bit of a panic there, trying to just settle and get something else. The other thing I'd be interested to know from everything I've seen in the numbers is lending is definitely down. Now, in Kenya, it's bad enough, even the best of times. But particularly now, my heart goes out to people who are maybe about to get the last sign-off on a loan.
Yeah.
And that's definitely on hold now.
So what's slowing down on the lending part? Is it people borrowing or institutions approving?
Oh, the institutions. Kenya's banking sector is extremely conservative. We all know that.
Yeah.
If it was conservative even in the good times, I think it's extremely conservative.
You can imagine
now, even worse
in
now.
uncertain times.
And if you go for a rerun, you guys are looking, if you're thinking of a mortgage, postpone it by a year.
What?
Well, I suppose I'm being a bit extreme.
Why?
But if I put, because the process of opening the lending again in commercial lending, especially for like mortgages, and even though that's fairly small in the scheme of things, for conservative institutions like banks, a rerun means that you're back into, you basically reset to zero.
Yeah.
And you have to go through the whole process. Government has to find billions and billions again. And in a place where there's hardly any headroom in the budget, it means even the banks will be even more sure that the government
is coming to them.
It's coming to borrow from them, which means for anyone else who's in commercial lending, is in business for commercial lending, a rerun will probably been at least postpone your borrowing for a while.
But is that caution or is that sharp practice? Because caution simply means you are being over careful. But if you can read the situation, and as you very aptly put it, we know that the government does borrow from our banks. Okay? Now, when you borrow from the banks, essentially, there is no money left for ordinary citizens to borrow.
True.
And when the government borrows, it is safer.
True.
You know you will get paid. True. So you don't have to bother the hassle of 10,000 people signing small things to ask for 50 bob. Okay? Well, on the scale of things, what we ask for is small compared to what the government borrows.
True.
So now I am arguing that isn't caution.
It's smart business, by
No, it is sharp practice.
The sharp practice, but
Yeah,
also,
but they live in a context called society.
Yes.
Yeah, and to me, the extent to which you do that, I can't fault them at this point. But it's true, it's sharp practice because that's an easy option. If you are sitting in the seat of a CEO in a bank, it's a no-brainer to go lend the government.
It is still sharp practice. And in this country, we have seen it happening and we've seen the consequences. This isn't the first time. We're talking about a certain period because of an election. But we've seen situations in this country where something similar happened over a period of time. And what accompanied it were very high interest rates, stratospheric interest rates. If you owed, and again, what the banks would pay you if you could place a deposit. Okay? Now, it is a false situation. False in this sense. This entire industry we call banking, the commodity they actually trade with is not this fiduciary issue we call notes, it's trust. That really is the key component that you trade with. Because if we determine today that this kind of shilling to us is worthless, believe me, we will not trade with it. And we will, in so doing, make it worthless. So I am saying the banks were later to realize that their core business, yes, do business with the government, but this so-called individual is key to your business. They realized it. Some of these big international banks sold off branches because they didn't see the need of having branches everywhere. They were later to try and regroup and go back to the very thing that they had turned against. I'm saying I've seen this. Yeah. So if we are at a period now when we're being told that they're doing the same thing, the outcome is not difficult to figure out. Yeah,
but unfortunately, it's a double whammy. We're doing badly enough. Let's put it in a context. We've had COVID. We've had all manner of issues. That's been 2 years. 2 years, nothing really has been happening. Now it's almost like a self-inflicted wound. Now we are back in election. We are adding to that pain. And I said during the COVID time, there are a lot of businesses that shut down for good, never to come back.
Yes.
right? So in a sense, it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate situation to be in right now. And so maybe talking about solutions of you would be quite interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, because obviously we can, waddle in the misery for a very long time. We could do that for years. However, what then would you see as outlets for solutions going forward? I mean, obviously we don't have control over what the election process will be. We don't have control over that. However, I would choose to believe that there are things that can be done, whether we're looking at small business, whether we're looking at big business.
That's right.
What are some solutions that we can say, okay, regardless of what happens next week?
I've spent so much time on this thought, and it's also as part of my job with working with SMEs. The first is a mindset thing, because you're right. It's true. Things can be so bad that all we do is sit and moan about how bad things are. And first is the mindset that says, even in the midst of this difficult time, there exists opportunity. Now, for example, for anyone who's in any type of credit business, there's going to be a huge, and it's going to happen anyway. I'm just describing what would be a reality. If anyone is in the loan sharking business or in any form of informal lending, the golden era is about. Well, I think it started since.
This is it.
This is it. And if especially we have the rerun, then we really have a lot of that pent-up demand. We'll have to find a home.
So it will shift to the informal.
So yeah, to the informal. But also, if you ever thought of going into a business, I think credit lending now will be consumer credit lending will be huge.
It's a place to go.
Huge. I actually say it still is, even if you don't go to a rerun, because there's still uncertainty, and we'll look at maybe in the next 5 to 7 months of this sort of wait and see.
Which ones are these? We're talking about those ones that advertise logbook loans.
Logbook, all of those are already having a fairly increased an uptick in there.
City, are you hearing?
No, I'm hearing this.
So if you want to buy shares into one of those, I think would be
Eric, the business you and I do, we can't segue into this.
But you guys sell stones.
Where?
From last time.
Oh, no.
You muliacha.
One of the things about setting up a company, the lawyers advise you that you write all the things you do.
Everything.
And then there's a clause where you just write, we do everything else under the sun. Okay? Now, yes, it does. It's not put in that language, but that's what it means. Now, that everything under the sun, okay, this business that you're talking about of lending people money, right, tricky at best. Because the fintechs are in that business.
Exactly.
Okay? It's loan sharking, really. But it is organized, it is structured, it has a nice name, and it has whatever. But the thing is, it wouldn't thrive if the need wasn't there.
True. It's what you call one of those dislocations that creates an opportunity. And so to that extent, it's true. But if you have investments, invest in some of those. I think you'll do pretty well.
Why not City?
But I know you're investing in people's misery. But the reality is...
No. You are lifting people out of there. You're helping them.
Eric,
the issue for Kenya is not even... I've said this many times. The issue for Kenya is not the cost of credit. It's the availability of credit. People will pay anything. Mama Mboga on the street. Here's a perverse situation. The poorer you are, the higher per unit cost you pay for your life.
Yep.
If you live in Kibera, in any slum, Mukura Jenga, and you don't have piped water to your house, you go and buy water for 20 shillings a 20 gallons.
And you don't ask the source of that water.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Yep.
But if you are to take that pricing of that debit of water and take it to Muthaiga, these guys are paying 10, 15, 20 times more. If you have to have a shower every morning, using that cost model, you would never have a shower. You'd have a shower once a month.
Yep.
So things like that means that the poorer you are, especially in an income distribution country like this, you're not just worse. You're compoundedly much worse. It's not just Kenya. I think it's any country, and so these situations, unfortunately, do drive people to its availability. It's not even the cost. Mama Mboga pays what? How much does she pays 20-30% per day just so that she can buy for the credit.
We're talking about a situation where our circumstances call for innovation.
True.
Now, in the past, when such situations have actually befallen on certain communities, it is new ideas of trying to ensure that the basics that are required are actually provided for. But we live in interesting times, really, because in these times, the thought process doesn't go to providing solutions that can benefit people, but it is like solutions that can, what? Exploit people.
Yeah, same space, just different,
Yes.
different motivations.
Perspective and perspective.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. And by the way, the historical aspect to this isn't new. I'm not discussing a concept that is new. There are always people who think like that. And what we're calling difficulties, they see it immediately as an opportunity. Okay. Now, there are those who see it as an opportunity to do something that will actually benefit people, genuinely benefit. Money can be made, but benefit. Then there are those who want to reap big. They want to cash in while they can. Let tomorrow take care of itself.
Sure. I mean, look,
That's capitalism for you.
Indeed, but I think all of these things then must run in tandem because we're looking at an economically depressed people.
Right.
I mean, and now we're talking about individual to individual, then the greater units of society, families, and then in workspaces. But then we're also looking at a depressed economy at government level because you're kind of in limbo and nothing is really happening. Sure, we have new governments at the county level coming in and, starting to, get work done. But if we're looking at the normal running of business, whereby there seems to be a vacuum at the moment and nothing is really happening, I think my question is, how do you then get the economy not to be at a stagnant position for too long to the point whereby it is going to hurt it fundamentally and that it will take even longer to get out of when things now stabilize at that level?
Happily for us, and I think increasingly in this continent, we have had so many occasions for depressing situations that it behooves us to default to certain things. For example, the notion that and this one of my advice generally through the hard times is if you belong to a group, this is the time for group dynamics. If you belong to a group, if you as a family and as a clan have a circle, a chama or what have you, this is the time you come into your own. Because one of the problems with just depending on the so-called official strata, formalized business, is that we all think that all our solutions only come from there. So I've said this before, that if, for example, you as a family group, and there are quite a few in this country, say, okay, we know that the next year is going to be bad. What can we do as a family unit, as a community unit, to tide us through this situation? You'll find there are some very innovative ones. One of them including the whole question of lending. Yes, the chama is not just good for out there. I know the ladies in this country have excelled at that. But it's a beautiful opportunity to start something like that. If you're a community group like that, why don't you seek to establish yourself to buy one of those sort of businesses or even start it from scratch? Another thing I find really interesting at this time is for those of us who've got in particular sectors, you should ask yourself that there are certain sectors that will never die. If anything, they come into their own. Food is a big one.
Yep.
So to me, it's beyond, the cost of food is still way too high. So if anyone and everyone who's able to do it efficiently, especially not just growing the food, I'm talking the whole value chain.
Entire
of
value
food.
chain.
Yeah. Pick a spot. If it's just transporting food from Limuru to Nairobi, this is probably the best time to break the cartels in this country, because for far too long, even if you go to Marigiti, it's a den of cartels. You cannot
offload your truck.
But your family, chama can get involved in. You don't have to all go to Marigiti. You can
Establish a midpoint.
A midpoint of your own.
Those guys will send Sakaja people on you.
Then now you have Sakaja. Maybe that's another thing. Leadership is going to be very important.
But something has happened in the recent past where you can actually bypass all this. There are individuals who actually grow the stuff who will actually supply you directly.
That's correct. In fact, I was going to say, one of the things you do with, for example, your family chamas is you get to do bulk buying. You don't hear much about that these days. There's no reason why everyone goes and buys retail. The last strata of society does not buy retail. It knows where to go pick wholesale. So even for ourselves, for food, if you can't grow it yourself, find places where you can aggregate with others and go directly to the
farm,
to the wholesaler or even the farmer. And in fact, you can enter those contracts, the supply contracts. They say, and I know a lot of vision communities in this country do that. In fact, what they do, they band together.
as
They
a
buy
community,
from
as a
specific,
neighborhood.
from specific farmers. But not only that, they buy from specific farmers who they specified and support with inputs so that it's organic.
Yeah.
It has very low or no GMO or fertilizer, residue. So you're having, and it's not just the Asian community, even the diplomatic community, have that.
Yes.
So to me, it's a huge opportunity there. So in the midst of this pain, it's time to get creative.
Isn't this through kind of what then the cooperative society was born?
That's right.
Secondly, are we not also, I almost hear you advocating for an almost socialist shift towards government operation, towards country operation, towards community operation?
Didn't say communist.
I didn't.
Social-
I
socialist.
hesitate at labels. For a simple reason is that if the solution is good, let's give it a solution. When you label it, then suddenly you get into camps. But to your point, if you move away, when you live in the city, we are very dependent on corporate structures, right? Majority of Kenyans are not in that space. And even us in the city, even a city like this is still conservative because its hinterland is more conservative and affects the city, keeps us conservative in our values. If you go to the West, it's the other way around. The city is so big, it influences its liberal values into the countryside to a large extent. So to your question, it's saying what is the most stable unit in society? It needs to come into its own now. And that to me is the family unit and derivatives of that. Because that's how you go through some of the difficult situations that you're going through that. Not to be depressed, but to say just to be prepared. I think it's prudent to saying, look, we have this family meeting every month. I know families have problems also. Can we bulk buy? Let's start with some small idea. Can we bulk buy? When you buy unga, why do we just even run to the supermarket? Why can't we all go and buy it from the miller in the industrial area?
Yeah.
Interesting enough, if you start doing things like that, during hard times like this, you could actually re-engineer the entire economy. But it has to be us as the citizens taking a proactive role.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Wahora. So, several scenarios, several likely judgments coming out of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
1, uphold the election.
Right?
2, go back to the election.
Right.
3,
Rubber man.
reverse the announcement. Okay. And declare Raila the winner.
Right.
Okay. 4,
Oh. Okay, those are three. Basically, the rerun, either one of them is declared. Others are just variations of that on those three things.
okay. So now,
So they uphold the election.
uh-huh.
Yes, they uphold the election. It's the shortest route to stability. Basically, as far as the average Kenyan is concerned, just let's get back to work as soon as possible. So irrespective of where you stand in terms of your political loyalties, the shortest route for point A to point B is, ruta continua, we move on. But of course, if half the country is divided, then one of the primary roles of a leader is how to reunite a country that's split. In that space, then I think we've covered a fair bit of it last time, where there are a lot of good policies or policy initiatives that the Kwanzaa are going to jump onto. And to me, it's sort of self-explanatory. If you've kept any eye on the manifesto, clearly the sectors to go into, the biggest sector by far will be agriculture again, and any value addition, agro-processing, that would be the way to go. So that, in a sense, preparing for that would mean that between now and then, also the other thing that government is likely to then do is begin to ease out of domestic borrowing, which would mean there'll be a lot more. Quite apart also from redirecting tax revenues towards facilitating and boosting SMEs. SMEs is the name of the game, whoever takes over. I would like to say, though, that if then you go back to the rerun, if you already have money, and this is something I've been thinking about for quite some while, if you have some money, that spare cash now.
What is some money? How much?
If you happen to be in a part in the Kenyan who has at least 10,000 or more in shillings that you don't need to spend at least for the next 6 months to a year. And under a rerun situation, the government is going to be borrowing more. So I'd like to encourage the largest number of Wanjikos out there, our grassroots Kenyan, to even form those chairmans and buy treasury bonds.
So lend to the government.
Lend to the government. By the way, instead of making it an issue for complaining, let's get in the game, because all the big boys are there and we see it as taking money from us. But why can't you also be part of that game? And you can, not only through Makiba, but also through your stockbroker.
Yeah.
Even in the open market, you can still buy treasury bonds.
Yeah.
Why do I say that? Because there's no financial institution will give you a return like a treasury bond does. For example, an infrastructure bond is 10% or more, depending on the tenure, the number of years, and its interest payment is tax-free. Why Kenyans, the average Kenyan street doesn't go there, it's partly financial education. Now, you also mentioned last time how Japan has a situation where its citizens lend to the government, and every 6 months get paid back billions and billions and billions from it. I think it's a way of changing the culture around that. But if you're a business and you have profits, again, I'd say, why do your profits sit in a bank? Now, usually if you're a businessman, you'll have already figured this out. But if you have cash that we call it reserves, get into the bond market.
Don't let it sit in your account. Just
should not
sitting
sit
there because it's depreciating.
Yeah, that's right.
Put it somewhere else.
Your money depreciates from the very day you put it in. Yeah. In fact, sometimes it says if you can deploy it to lend it to someone else, at least you preserve its value, because your interest rate keeps it in value. But as long as it's sitting in your account, it's dead money. And even the banks don't pay you enough for inflation.
So that is just like a basic thing. Yeah, if you have 10,000 or more that you could say you can spare for 6 months, whatever the case, look into getting into that.
If you're going to get into savings, get into savings where you're also helping the country.
Or you help
in a manner of speaking,
and getting the most out of.
Yeah.
In a short time.
How much will a savings account give you maximum?
What, 7-8?
7-8%.
Yeah.
What is the inflation rate?
6 point what? Was it?
Okay, it's about 6.7.
Yeah.
Right. So your real benefit 0.0. In other words, it only takes about 10 days after you put in your money
for it to
begin to deteriorate.
Yeah.
So again, why don't all the wealthy people in this country and the world over not use savings accounts? There's a reason. So to maybe a broader heading that I was going to say is that it's time for financial education for Kenyans across the board, and that should be actually a curriculum in our primary schools. Yeah, every kid should have a CDS account with Central Bank of Kenya. The kids should learn those sort of ideas.
Start learning how the capital markets work and such.
That's right. Overnight money markets. We should be in all that space. It's not just for the warriors and others in the world. It's for everyone.
So we're essentially saying that no matter what the forecast is, no matter what the actual weather situation economically in the country, there's always an outlet through which these basic units of society can weather the storm, as it were.
That's right.
Regardless of what impasse there is at government level, whatever the political situation is, there's no reason then, from what I hear you saying, that everybody, because we're talking about individuals, we're talking about families, we're talking about organizations that shut down, businesses that are kind of in limbo, not really knowing, can we move forward? Are we going to die out? But there's no reason why, if having done the prerequisite work, there's no reason why the depressed situation should depress the rest of these entities to the point where they cannot operate.
Yeah, let us say, I'm calling it a mind shift to saying, even in the midst of pain, there are opportunities. And even in the midst of our current pain, I strongly believe that there's opportunities. And it's about financial education, principally, but also seeking out expertise. I have a couple of experts in my team who just do financial education for the average citizen. And in fact, it was interesting what he recently showed how he's got a high schooler who's joined a club, and how his kids, he's training these kids to participate in the money market. It's fantastic. Because this guy is 18. By the time he's 28, in 10 years' time, he'll have a portfolio. How wonderful it would be if your kids have a portfolio. Then you don't have to worry even about them educating them. They could easily find, well, they won't easily, but they can contribute towards their own education. So the idea of creating a portfolio for your children or training them, even though you yourself may not have one, a portfolio mentality is born of difficult times like this. Because, for example, if you had, let's say, 1 million shillings in a treasury account, right, and you're getting 10%, a million is 100,000. Divide that by 12, it's about 12,000 a month. That's decent money. Decent money.
Yep.
Now, the mentality that says it's delayed gratification, I don't spend money now, but when it sits somewhere where it's growing, that's called passive income. And that's good for me because and it's a 10-year, for example, a 10-year bond. Every month,
there's money coming in.
And if you don't need the money, you have a
compounds.
Wonderful thing, yes, of compounding. We're just reinvesting it back in. So it's time to shift mindset.
So is that something that you do at Sandbox Capital, or do you have other partners?
Yes, we do that, but we tend to partner with experts.
Okay.
Yeah, and even businesses. Even I say the same thing I'm saying for you having a portfolio as an individual.
Yeah.
Even a business should have an investment portfolio. Because for the same reasons, you want to multiply
you're making money, you don't want the money
your revenue
just sitting
streams
there.
of revenue. Yes, revenue streams.
Okay. Wait, and Gary? What did you tell them? Ati ulichukua hii pesa ukapeleka wapi?
Yes, this is partly where good professional advice is useful, because all of that can be made so that it's tax either neutral, tax effective, or at a minimum, you've made sure you've complied with the tax law. And to their credit, KRA I know gets a lot of bashing, but there's clearly a reform happening in there in terms of being more citizen friendly.
Yeah.
And it's good to acknowledge the good things when they happen.
Yeah.
And there's definitely there's a mind shift there. So it's probably a conversation you can begin to have. But it's good to have some professional advice. But even if professional advice in a chama, a family group, someone in your family knows about these things. When next time you have a family gathering, say,
Just
Uncle so and so, you do this thing.
Tell us.
You come for an afternoon, and you know they're just for the ideas. We come and changa right there. Everyone 10,000 bob, and you're going to get a professional broker or someone to begin our family portfolio or individual portfolios towards that.
When you say let's move and start thinking agriculture and the entire value chain, so there is from importing fertilizer to selling food in the market, right?
Canning oranges. I mean,
Entire value chain.
Yeah.
What are the challenges currently in that sector? Because I think it's important to, first of all, knowing where the challenges are and where the pitfalls would be, so that then you know how to avoid them.
It's a sector that, for all its potential, has so many gaps, and that you have had, to be honest, a huge policy failure in that space. Everyone grows food. So our problem with Kenya is not underproduction of food. It doesn't get where it needs to efficiently. So one of our biggest needs is logistics, right? Another problem we have is, of course, lack of credit. The last thing, of course, is markets. Where are your markets? And so I always say that it's best to start local. And so, for example, if you already have land, and I've said again, coming back, today my theme is family. In emergency and difficult times, difficult to start with a family. What are things that are happening in that unit, in that clan, in that club of filial associations that can help you minimize the cost of living, right? You talked about buying bulk, but also what about growing bulk? Food? Yes, a lot of the explosion of cancer in our part of the world has everything to do with pesticides and non-organic food production. Why not go back to that? Why not find out from others? There are people already doing this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, and that's people from Diplomatic Corps and also from Asian brothers and sisters, and many others, even other Kenyans, who are actually doing this idea of aggregating their demand and having food grown for purpose. That's a huge opportunity in this day and age. And it doesn't have to be expensive, by the way. Because in a group setting, someone has land. I'm sure even around here, even that's it's still a farm, you know. It's still you could acquire someone. You can still do something with it. And it's a mind shift. A mind shift. Yeah.
So even as we're looking at this mind shift, I mean, one of the things that you said previously, I mean, clearly the opportunities are then born from a depressed situation. I think we can have many examples around the world where we're looking at heavily industrialized countries today who came from a point of, having been, things were way down there. It was a terrible situation, and then from that then was born inspired. Look, we're at rock bottom anyway. How much lower are we going to go, right? But it was something that gripped everybody. Was involved. This is why I gave that socialist skew to this. Everybody was involved in it. So what you're talking about now, education, whether it's somebody who lives in the urban setting or somebody who lives in the rural setting, it doesn't really matter. That if everybody then comes together with this mindset that look, we are partially responsible for our savior, because I think, and if what we're looking at right now is that we're all looking towards government to save us.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people are so heavily invested in an election and voting, that we're all looking at, can I be saved from my financial situation? Can I be saved from my health situation? Can I be saved from, whatever it is that I do not have? Let me go and vote so that my situation can get better. But are we then reversing it and saying, hold on a minute, there's something I have, there's something you have, there's something you have. How about we come together and then make this thing work? As opposed to all of us looking at this almighty vote and saying, until that is put in place, we will not be able to survive.
That is so true. Even the psychological health of us as a people across this continent is this notion of big man dependence. The reality is, for some strange reason, we are sort of cursed with this thing of as long as we see our man at the top seat, we will not feel safe. But the reality, even when you have a man up there, he doesn't care about you. He can't. You're 54 million or however millions you are. You have to be the savior you're looking for. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And to a large extent, I believe that Kenya, a lot of Kenyans have long moved on. Part of the reason I think there's some bit of impatience in their politics is the average Wanjiku just wants to get on back to business.
Yes.
He doesn't want, you guys sort yourselves out because you're not really going to affect me. So to your point, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you see, I mean, yes, even in as much as that would happen, and I mean, it's not something that's in the stratosphere. It is actually something that we can bring down here. In as much as that would happen, and you have then thriving individuals, you have then thriving basic units of society. Please paint for us the picture then how then that would affect the economy at large. What are the inroads when you see that happening? How does then that bubble over towards the economy then starting to thrive?
It breaks one of the biggest bondages I think we have as Africans, as Kenyans and Africans. And the notion that the path to wealth is only through power. The reality is, for 99% of us, that will never be a reality, however talented you are. It's left to a small minority who will kill to get there. And once they get there, it's all about themselves and their family to stay there. So the moment you break the notion that the only path to wealth is political, and saying, okay, it's up to me. It's up to me as individuals. We break two things at the same time. We break that mentality of looking up to this great savior who will almost always disappoint us. But secondly, it helps us revert back to our own genius as individuals, but more effectively as collective communities with common interests. I've asked the question. Ladies have been extremely successful in this country with chamas. Men don't seem to do well with chamas. But I say the majority of the wealth of this country is with the men. Imagine what would happen if we just measured and matched our women and created male chamas. Do you know, I think within a generation we'll do it with banks? Because if I need to borrow,
Shh, they might hear you.
they'll probably they'll put my name on a hit list somewhere. Can you imagine what would happen? Because I saw this beauty with my mother. You know, my mother, by the time she passed, was 97. Unbeknownst to me, my mother had bought and built, because I was in Australia. She had bought a property in Nyeri. She had built 12 flats. She had gone. I found that she had Mabati houses out
somewhere.
Eastlands, about 30.
They're called counter suits.
That's of Mabati ones. On a road reserve. So it was not even, the land was not even hers. She was renting like 3K. So I said, my mom seemed to have cash. She seemed very liquid. And she has a full-time job. She worked for the American Embassy.
She had a full-time job.
She had a full-time job, and she has all these things she was doing. And I thought to myself, to this day, with all my education, I've never matched my mother's liquidity. God, rest in,
so what was she using?
What she was, it's this notion of saying, it's me, it's me, it's me. It's not someone else. And then just get on with it. And if you don't know, find out someone who knows. There's a second part to this question is, invest in yourself, but don't invest yourself in academic knowledge. Invest yourself in how does the world actually work.
In street smartness.
Yeah. I have a situation, a friend of mine, when he was 23, I think 23, he was in Stanford. I mean, such was his smarts. And he learned trading. Finished Stanford, but he didn't go for some high-falutin job. What did he do? He said, I know enough from this to get into stock trading. So by the time he was 30, he was a multi-millionaire. Then he comes back home and he's completely took off. He said, it's not important for me to just have a good degree. I have to apply this knowledge. I have to make it knowledge that is applicable. So for me. So that's another thing. Not only a shift of you seek for trading and advice, but you only seek for advice that gives you practical skills to apply immediately. And it's in a money market space, it's fairly it's much easier because the barriers to entry are very low, right? You can learn even without a degree how to invest in the money market, how to help others. Even if you don't have the money, you can learn and teach others and have them pay you to do the same thing. But it's a mind shift thing. Now imagine if, again, coming back to the issue of men, if men created chambers in this country, and those chambers said, we are going to buy treasury bonds. Do you know a point will come where you'll be competing with the banks? And I know a good number of our banks, now happily they are local, but a good number of our banks are foreign owned or have a large stake. And in fact, even our most successful banks, the only thing that stops them being foreign owned, because they're getting a place where they're getting noticed now, is the fact that it's a government policy to keep Kenyan. Otherwise, Equity, KCB,
they'll be taken over.
They'll all have been gone by now. So that's another thing for men out there.
Having worked with the men for all these years, what is it what's the hindrance? Is it ego? Is it lack of trust? Is it...
All of the solitude mindset.
All of the above. Men seems to rally best when they've got adversity.
When there's
serious
a problem that
adversity.
come together.
So I don't know to what extent our political situation gives us opportunity for adversity to get together. But it's not all men. It's also cultural, because other communities, Somali community, the Asian community, the Jewish community, Anglo-Saxon community, all do it. I know Africans don't. It's a deep question to ask. Because to me, it's a secret. One of the biggest secret of community wealth is a notion of working as a corporate together, not as individuals. You pack your ego out when you come in here, and it's a men's jam. You can start on the three of us, and then invite others. No, sorry, not without you. I can find
the men.
I'm sure the ladies. You can find other ladies who can do
She's
that.
in 7.
She's in 7.
But then, don't you think that if you look at the way women go about managing money, there's a commodity that they have in abundance. It's called trust.
It's trust founded on a deep need for security. So they self-insure by banding together.
And the men?
Men, they don't. We find that we seem to pride ourselves in our independence, even though you're dying by yourself in the corner there.
You want to be alone. You want to be the king of your own jungle, whether the
the
jungle is
dry.
dry.
But it's cultural.
That's the popular explanation, but is it really true?
Listen, in my almost 60 years of life, I see it every time. In fact, I'll give a good example. It's my father. There's a time my father, he's 89 now. He had some serious employment, some serious jobs in his lifetime. But I think back and I think, gosh, had he banded together with two, 3 other people, as I know some of his peers did, and currently own half of Nairobi, he'd be in a very different place. So there's some rumor to that thing.
No,
that,
you don't judge your father too high. We have seen
He's a
people
good
like
man.
you.
He's a good man.
We've seen people like you. When people were owning half of Nairobi,
were you?
what were you doing?
My last point before I go on, it's precisely that. I grew up knowing that and saying, how am I going to be different? So when I arrived back from Australia, the first thing I decided is I'm going to find land. And I did. And took a risk with it. And right now I'm sitting on a pretty good
Sizable chunk.
capital gain. But it's a whole notion that say the opportunities haven't run out. We just have to be smarter to look for them.
Okay.
And never say that, throw up your hand that it's too hard. It's not.
There's always an opportunity.
There's always opportunity.
Well, always a pleasure having you. And welcome again.
Asante.
Couple of days to come, maybe next week. So after the whatever outcome, right? So now we look practically. So now we know the Supreme Court has told us this and the other. What do we do to continue surviving as those guys in Karen continue eating off our money? Because that's what they'll be doing anyway. Whichever, either of them will be.
They're sweet.
They're being fed by us. So how can we make more money so that we can feed them well? Thank you for joining us. Wahoro Ndoho is the CEO of Sandbox Capital. Keep it here for more conversations.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.